Did you know that these restaurants had multiple branches across the country in the 1950s and 60s, but most of them rarely exist today? From restaurants that became forgotten due to devastating natural disasters, to the restaurants that closed down because they went bankrupt, these are 10 restaurants from the 50s and 60s that we miss. Number 1. Burger Chef. Burger Chef was a popular fast food chain in the U.S. The chain had over 1,000 locations at its peak, but declined in popularity with the rise of competitors like McDonald's. The restaurant was founded in Indianapolis in 1954 and rapidly expanded across the United States. At its peak in 1973, it had over 1,000 locations, including some in Canada. Burger Chef was once one of the popular fast food chains in the United States, with only McDonald's boasting more locations at the time. The chain was renowned for its retro-style logo featuring a light globe and its innovative Works bar, where you could customize your burger just the way you like it. They also came up with the idea of a kids' meal, combining a burger with dessert and a toy in 1978. Leaving a lasting impact on the fast food industry and the hearts of many who fondly remember the brand. Eventually, the chain lost steam in the 80s, with the last spot closing in 1996. And this leaves us with nostalgic memories of a past when life was simpler and we enjoyed the little things. You can't talk about ice cream brands that people want back without talking about this next one, though. Number 2. Red Barn. This fast food chain emerged in Ohio in the 1960s and was known for its signature menu items, including the Big Barney, a hamburger that is similar to a Big Mac, and Barnbuster burgers, as well as a self-serve salad bar. It also offered fried chicken, fish sandwiches, and a pioneering salad bar. Most of the food was served on the buffet. With their distinctive barn-shaped buildings, Red Barn restaurants were easily recognizable. The restaurants were in the shape of barns, they had a glass front, and limited seating. The Red Barn quickly became a favorite among burger lovers because America embraced fast food culture in the 1960s. At its peak, Red Barn attained a significant size with approximately 400 locations across 22 states, although it never quite rivaled the scale of fast food giants like McDonald's or Burger King. However, the chain's success was short-lived, as ownership changed hands multiple times in the late 1970s, which led to the subsequent closing of all its locations by the late 1980s. At number 3, we have Carrols. Carrols was founded in 1960 by Herb Lotz and Alan Coffin in Syracuse, New York. The chain quickly expanded across the Northeast and Midwest, with 150 stores at its peak in the 1960s. Carrols was known for their signature club burger, which was similar to the Big Mac in McDonald's. They were also famous for their char-grilled burgers, as well as their speedy service and affordable prices. They also sold popular Looney Tunes drinking glasses. Most Carrols restaurant locations were converted to Burger King franchises in 1975, with less profitable stores shuttered. After the conversion, the Carrols brand was only found overseas in Finland, Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, and Russia, except for 2 stores. One on Roosevelt Avenue in Carteret, New Jersey, which closed in the late 1970s, and a single franchisee-owned store in Batavia, New York. Both of these latter 2 stores operated under the Carrols name into the 1980s, before closing. By the late 1980s, Carrols had largely disappeared from the fast food landscape, with many locations closing or being converted to other brands. Today, the Carrols name is still remembered fondly by many who grew up eating at the chain, but it remains a nostalgic relic of a bygone era in fast food. Aren't you hungry for a Henry's? Head for Henry's. Does this advertising slogan ring a bell? If yes, then you know what burger joint we are talking about next. Henry's Hamburgers. In 1954, the Bresler's Ice Cream Company decided to expand into the growing fast food drive-in industry. Company executives were looking for a new outlet to promote higher sales of their malts and shakes without altering their existing ice cream shop franchises. Under the name Henry's Hamburgers, many franchises were eventually established. The name Henry was chosen to honor the memory of the late Henry Bresler, one of the brothers who had founded the ice cream company. Henry's was modeled after James Collins' hamburger handout restaurants in Southern California, which in turn had been modeled after the McDonald Brothers San Bernardino operation. They were both a Chicago area competitor and copy of McDonald's. By 1956, Henry's Hamburgers had 35 locations in the Chicago area. At the time, that outnumbered some of the industry's current giants, such as McDonald's. By the early 1960s, there were over 200 Henry's restaurants across America, with operations headquarters in Chicago. By the mid-1970s, Henry's hamburger locations began closing while repeated mergers and ownership changes took place within the Bressler Company. The only remaining location is in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Our next bygone burger joint was also a standout in the 50s and 60s. Gino's Hamburgers. Gino's was founded in 1957 by Gino Marchetti, a former Baltimore Colts football player, and his business partner, Alan Amiche. This fast food restaurant chain operated in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, primarily in Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The chain quickly gained popularity for its high-quality burgers made with freshly ground beef. Gino's expanded to over 30 locations across the Mid-Atlantic region by the mid-1970s. In 1967, Gino's merged with Tops Drive-In, a chain of 18 drive-in restaurants located in the Washington, D.C. area. Most of the Tops locations were rebranded as Gino's. In the early 1970s, the company attempted to expand from its Mid-Atlantic base into the Midwest. However, these locations only operated for a short period. For one location, it purchased Orchestra Hall in Detroit and planned to demolish the structure to construct a restaurant. When the plan became public, it led to a grassroots campaign to save and restore the abandoned structure. Gino's also expanded into Massachusetts and Connecticut, but they had difficulties there because Gino Marchetti was not known in the region. People also confused them with the Papa Gino's pizza chain that was based in Massachusetts. These locations were eventually closed, and many now house other chains, especially Burger King. Gino's also converted some to fish restaurants, but these too failed. By the late 1980s, Gino's had largely disappeared from the fast food landscape, with many locations closing or being converted to other brands. The same thing applies to this next burger joint. Jerry's Hamburgers was a fast food restaurant chain in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, United States. Jerry's started sometime in 1962, and it was not surprising that this restaurant was modeled largely after the early McDonald's-style restaurants at the time, because one of the original owners of Jerry's was a former vice president for McDonald's. In fact, the cartoon icon used by Jerry's on its marquee was very similar to the Mr. Speedy used by McDonald's, and even closer to the later McDonald's characters, such as Mayor McCheese, being in the form of a hamburger with eyes and arms and legs coming from the sides and bottom of the bun. There were at least 13 Jerry's restaurants by 1980. Red, blue, and white were the main exterior colors, often in the form of tiles. In the early days, Jerry's restaurants had little or no inside seating and were geared towards fast takeout service. But the latter versions of the restaurants had interior seating and an expanded menu. In 1981, the Jerry's Corporation folded, but several stores continued to operate independently. The last Jerry's was in Beloit, Wisconsin, and closed in 1999. Even though it's since lost popularity, Jerry's still holds a special place in our old schoolers' hearts. The next burger joint also holds a similar fondness in the hearts of 50s and 60s kids. Sandy's was a chain of American fast food restaurants begun in 1956 by 4 entrepreneurs from Kewanee, Illinois: Gus, Robert, Paul, and Davidson. These 4 friends bought the rights to open McDonald's in central Illinois and opened their first restaurant in Urbana, Illinois. The restaurant was a huge success, especially with students and families from the University of Illinois. Because of this success, the friends decided to open more McDonald's restaurants in nearby cities like Decatur and Peoria. By the end of the 1960s, Sandy's, though still successful, was short of cash, a major handicap with the pricey new television advertising being actively employed by its competitors. Meanwhile, the successful Hardee's chain in the southern United States, founded by Wilbur Hardy, had money and was looking to expand its operations. The solution was a merger. On November 30th, 1971, a Hardee's purchase of all of Sandy's stock was announced, and Sandy's plaid berets were soon to be seen no more. Sandy's had expanded to Belgium and Canada before its dismantling. Originally, Sandy's was only to merge with Hardee's and maintain its own identity, but in 1973, 90% of the locations agreed to switch to Hardee's. The other 10% remained Sandy's. In 1979, the last Sandy's location in Muscatine, Iowa became a Hardee's. Any remaining locations went under independent ownership and changed their names to avoid infringing on Sandy's name. If you lived in Oakland in the 50s and 60s, you should remember this next one: the Doggy Diner. This restaurant was opened by owner Al Ross. The original restaurant was a tremendous success, and Ross opened other Doggy Diners throughout the East Bay and San Francisco. The restaurant chain grew until Ross owned 30 diners, including downtown Oakland, each with the iconic, giant, rotating dachshund heads designed by Harold Bachman. The first Doggy Diner was opened on Oakland's San Pablo Avenue in 1948 and grew in popularity. At one time, there were 30 locations around the San Francisco Bay Area, mostly concentrated in San Francisco. The chain was sold to Ogden Corporation around 1969. They sold French fries, hamburgers, hot dogs, and sodas. The Doggy Diner chain went out of business in 1986 after trying to compete with big chain restaurants such as McDonald's and Burger King. Its founder, Al Ross, died in 2010 at age 93. The brand name has been revived for hot dog sales at Oracle Park, the home stadium of the San Francisco Giants. Number 9. Kewpee. Kewpee Hamburgers is a chain of fast food restaurants founded in 1923 in Flint, Michigan by Samuel V. Blair under the name Kewpee Hotel in a Stand. Kewpee was one of the first to institute curbside service, which later morphed into a drive-in service, and then finally was transformed into a drive-through service. The Lima Kewpee locations have locally raised beef delivered daily to each Kewpee restaurant. The Kewpee restaurant in Lima, Ohio is considered a historic site. In 1926, Blair sold the rights to the Kewpee trademarks to Toledo, Ohio Kewpee hotel operator Ed Adams. In Lansing, Michigan, the Weston family has owned and operated the Kewpee's restaurant since it opened in 1923. The Weston family has had as many as 2 Kewpee restaurants open at one time in Lansing. After Blair retired in 1944, he rented out his original Kewpee location. When he passed away in 1945, people who ran Kewpee restaurants kept paying fees to use the Kewpee name. Later, in 1958, Blair's family sold some of their locations, including the original one, to people who promised to keep paying those fees. A few years later, in 1963, some Kewpee locations in Grand Rapids were sold and became a separate business called Mr. Fables. Lastly, in today's video, we have Arnold's Bar and Grill. Arnold's Bar and Grill is a historic restaurant located in Cincinnati, Ohio. Arnold's Bar and Grill was established in 1861, making it one of the oldest continuously operating bars in the United States. Initially, it catered to the city's riverboat and railroad workers. However, by the mid-20th century, Arnold's had begun to decline, struggling to compete with newer, trendier establishments. The restaurant faced challenges related to changing consumer preferences, increased competition, and economic downturns. These iconic eateries may have started as humble hamburger stands, but they've become an integral part of American culture and cuisine. Let us know in the comments section which of these burger joints was your favorite.